They used my name to cover up their crime, and I didn't even know until I saw the audit. I'm Jenna. I spent years trying to save my family's store, only to find out my parents were quietly funneling money out and blaming me for the losses. Would you stay loyal or walk away, knowing the truth could tear your family apart? Let me tell you how I found the paper trail and how I finally decided enough was enough. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments, and let's begin the story. They didn't sit me down for a conversation. They just started acting like I was the reason our family business was dying. I should have known something was off when Dad didn't even look up from his spreadsheet. Usually, he'd grunt a hello or ask about my weekend. This time, nothing. Just the click, click, click of his ancient wireless mouse and the burnt toast smell of the old break room Keurig working overtime. I stood in the doorway of our cramped office at Morales Market, holding a stack of handouts I'd printed at home. New marketing ideas, coupons for fall, some local partnerships I was proud of. They didn't even get a glance. Mom sat at the tiny table, stirring her tea like she was trying to make it disappear. My sister Melissa scrolled her phone under the table like a teenager, and Kyle leaned against the mini fridge, arms crossed, silent as ever. So, I began, too brightly, I've been thinking about the fall harvest campaign. What if we partner with that orchard in Hendersonville for some co-branded gift baskets? We could do a local roots, local goods theme. I already drafted a layout for the emails. Color palettes? Sample copy? Dad cut in, voice flat. Maybe if you hadn't wasted money on those podcast ads last quarter, we wouldn't need a gimmick to get people in the door. The silence after that was thicker than the dust on the ceiling fan above us. My smile froze. They weren't gimmicks. They were targeted impressions. We have supplier invoices we can't cover, Jenna. That was Mom. Her voice wasn't raised, but it didn't have to be. It had the sharpness of someone tired of repeating themselves. People don't pay in impressions, they pay in dollars. Melissa didn't even look up, but the corner of her mouth curled just slightly, the kind of smirk that says, "Told you so," even if she never said a word. I nodded slowly, then folded the handouts back into my folder, the edges creasing under my fingers. Okay, I hear you. No one responded. The meeting ended as unceremoniously as it began. Dad closed his laptop. Mom walked out with her half-full tea, muttering something about vendor callbacks. Melissa followed, tapping out a text with manicured precision. Only Kyle lingered a moment, gave me a brief, sympathetic glance, then disappeared behind the inventory shelves. I sat alone for a while, staring at the wall clock shaped like an apple, its hands ticking with dull indifference. That clock used to be a joke between me and Dad. Always 10 minutes behind, he'd grumble. I'd reply, "It's just fashionably late," like good branding. He used to laugh at that. Back then, he thought my degree in marketing made me the fresh air the business needed. I blinked the thought away, then almost mechanically reached for my phone. There was a flagged message at the top of my inbox, from the vendor account team. Subject: Q3 campaign codes. Clarification needed. The body was short. Too short. Hi, Jenna. Our review flagged multiple Q3 transactions under brand creative codes. Could you please clarify the purpose and internal approval pathway? This affects reconciliation for your August invoice. I blinked at the screen. My heart didn't drop. It just shifted, like furniture sliding an inch during an earthquake. Quiet, but unmistakable. They didn't even ask me if I had a plan. They just assumed I was the one who messed it up. I stepped outside for air. Late summer in Asheville was clingy, warm but with a hint of rot, like apples left too long on the branch. I stood by the sidewalk planter, watching a family walk past with canvas tote bags, their toddler dragging a pumpkin-shaped balloon. And then I heard it. Dad, talking to a customer near the front. Kids these days think aesthetics can fix broken math. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. I looked down at my hands. Faint ink smudges from my pitch materials. A reminder that I'd actually tried. That maybe, just maybe, I still believed I could help us bounce back. Back inside, I found Kyle near the walk-in cooler. He looked up from restocking and raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Do I look okay?" He hesitated, then said, "You don't look like the problem." I almost smiled. "Thanks, I think." He nudged a crate toward me. "Are you still doing that cider demo next week?" "Not sure they'll let me." He shrugged. "You should do it anyway." I watched him walk away, and for the first time all day, I felt something unfreeze inside me. That night, I opened my laptop in bed and pulled up an old file. Q3 Strategy 2022. It was colorful, maybe too much. Full of hope. Local storytelling, email funnels, podcast integrations. I'd even mocked up signage with customer testimonials. I stared at the slide titled, "Why We Still Matter." The header font was called Sunshine Gothic. I closed the file without saving. Then I pulled up a blank document and typed one line. They don't see it now. But I do. Then saved the file as not done yet. I wasn't looking for secrets. I was just trying to clean up my corner of the mess. But the rot ran deeper than my desk. It was one of those gray September mornings in Asheville where the sky looked like someone had forgotten to open the blinds. I sat at a corner table in Maple and Milk, my usual cafe, laptop open, half-drunk cold brew in hand. The folk music playing softly in the background reminded me of a time when things were simpler, like Saturday mornings with the windows open and cinnamon baking in the air. I wasn't doing anything dramatic, just cleaning up the Q3 files, trying to make sense of our marketing spend. But something didn't line up. According to the company calendar, we hadn't sponsored any local events in August, yet the expense column showed 3 separate event hosting charges. Same vendor name, different amounts. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had mislabeled the entries. But as I scrolled deeper, a pattern started to form. Charges marked as consulting repeated under different vendor IDs. One of them, Blueberry Ridge Holdings LLC, caught my eye. The name sounded like a luxury soap brand, not a business partner. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Meeting Thursday still on?" Then another from Kyle. "Check your spam folder." Vendor updates came through. I called Mom. "Hi, quick question," I said. "Do you remember authorizing any consulting invoices for August?" "Oh, that? Don't worry about it," she said. "I already handled that." "But the amounts?" "It's fine, Jenna, not your lane." She hung up before I could finish. Her voice had a kind of casual finality, like she was brushing lint off a jacket. And for some reason, that stung more than I expected. I sat there, unmoving, the cursor blinking on a half-filtered spreadsheet. Then a memory floated up. Uninvited. Me at 10, sitting on the front porch with cherry stains on my fingers. We'd baked cornbread muffins for the fall fair, and Mom let me label the bags with my own handwriting. "You've got a real eye," she told me, ruffling my hair. "My right hand." I used to beam when she said that. Now she barely saw me. Trying to shake off the fog in my chest, I pulled up a chat with Angela Kim, an old college friend now working in compliance for a regional bank. "Hey, weird question. Can I send you a vendor list to glance over?" "Totally casual," Angela replied in minutes. "Sure. Forward it to my personal email. I'll take a look after lunch." I compiled a folder, named it something innocent, Fall Promo Review, and attached the vendor spreadsheet. I told myself it was nothing. I was probably being paranoid. Angela called 2 hours later. "Jenna," she said, her voice quieter than usual, Blueberry Ridge Holdings? That LLC is registered to your parents' old cabin address. My hand froze on the mouse. You sure? Public record, I can send you the link if you want, but… Yeah, that's them. Have you ever discovered something that made you question your entire childhood? Like finding a hidden crack in a place you thought was solid? If you've ever felt that kind of betrayal, drop a comment with the number 7 below. Let's see what I do next. I opened a new folder on my desktop and renamed it, just in case. Angela called again an hour later. Listen, I poked a little more, she said. Some of these vendor names? They're linked to one another through shared addresses and phone numbers. Jenna, if you keep digging, this could get complicated. For you. For me? I asked, my chest tightening. You're listed as marketing lead. If there's misappropriation, the paper trail might look like it started with you. I packed up my laptop but stayed seated. The cafe was thinning out, and the hum of conversation faded into the clatter of dishes in the back. I took one last sip of my now cold brew and stared out the window. Across the street was an old consignment shop. My mom used to bring me there after school when I was little. We'd dig through vintage kitchenware, and she'd talk about how one day Morales Market would carry its own line of preserves, complete with gingham-wrapped lids. She used to dream in full color. Now I couldn't tell if any of it had ever been real. On impulse, I closed my laptop and walked the 3 blocks toward Morales Market. I didn't go inside, just stood near the side window peering through the glass. Mom stood behind the register, laughing with a customer, tucking a receipt into a paper bag with practiced ease. She looked content, unbothered. Was she always this good at pretending? Or was I just late to notice? I pulled out a notebook and, almost without thinking, started sketching something. A logo idea from last winter that never saw the light of day. A plum in soft watercolor, with the word wholesome underneath it in script. Back then I thought it was too simple, too quiet. But maybe quiet was what we needed now. I messaged Kyle just to feel a thread of family that wasn't unraveling. Hey, hope your shift's okay. I found something weird in the ledgers. Let's talk soon? No reply yet, but at least the message was sent. That had to count for something. The sun was setting by the time I got back to my apartment. I set down my laptop bag and stood in the kitchen, unsure of what to do with my hands. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and printer ink. I reached for a sticky note and wrote 3 words. Track everything quietly. Then I stuck it beside the fridge magnet that read, Morales Market, locally grown pride. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't know if I believed that anymore. When they asked me to give a speech, I thought it was a peace offering. Turns out they just needed a pretty distraction. The email arrived late Thursday evening with the subject line, Finalized speech draft, please review. It was from Melissa, and I almost didn't open it. But curiosity tugged at me. I clicked. The words on the screen looked familiar at first. Some of my phrasing was intact. But then it took a strange turn. There were phrases like stewards of local heritage and sustained market values that I'd never used in my life. It read like something scraped from a brochure at the Chamber of Commerce. I opened my original draft and began comparing line by line. My metaphor about the harvest rhythm, how every season brings a chance to start again, was missing, replaced by something about leveraging regional synergies, whatever that meant. I texted Melissa, Hey, I noticed a few changes in the speech. Can we meet and go over it? Her reply came 5 minutes later. Carol and I reviewed. It just needed softening. Don't overthink it, just smile and deliver. That smiley face felt like a slap. The next evening, the event hall buzzed with low laughter and clinking glasses. Long banquet tables were draped with ivory linens, faux candlelight flickered from centerpieces, and the smell of maple-glazed carrots and chicken cordon bleu floated through the air. I adjusted my blazer and walked in, scanning the crowd for anyone, who might anchor me. Melissa stood near the stage in a burgundy wrap dress, surrounded by a half-circle of town investors. She looked polished and perfectly at ease, the kind of charm that gets compliments from strangers in grocery store lines. Her voice floated above the crowd as she laughed at something a silver-haired man said. I recognized him, Mr. Llewellyn, one of the original backers of Morales Market, back when we still called it the Root Cellar. I approached the event program table and picked one up. There was a section titled Words from the Family, but it only listed Richard Morales and Melissa Morales Hunt. No mention of me, not even a footnote. I stood frozen in place for a second, then slowly turned the page, as if maybe I'd missed something. But no, I hadn't. That's when I felt it, that slow, sinking realization. They didn't just want me in the background. They wanted me invisible. A soft voice behind me. Looking for your name? I turned. It was Kyle in a navy button-up, sleeves rolled. Guess I didn't make the cut, I said with a half smile. You're here. That should count, he offered. But even he didn't sound convinced. Melissa's speech was first. She took the stage with a practiced pause and a grateful nod. Community isn't just where we sell, it's who we serve, she began. Her tone was warm, genuine even. Then, about 3 minutes in, she dropped the line I'd originally written for my own speech. When you plant with intention, the harvest is always honest. I blinked. She'd taken it, verbatim, and passed it off like it was hers. No glance my way, no footnote, just applause. As the clapping died down, Carol passed behind me, leaned in just slightly. Keep your voice steady tonight, Jenna. It reflects on all of us. She said it with a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. When it was my turn, I walked up the small riser and gripped the sides of the podium. I read the printed speech as is, barely hearing myself. It was like watching someone else wear your skin. Halfway through, I glanced up. I caught sight of the banner behind me, cream and gold, tastefully backlit, rooted in trust, family first. Since 1987. I suddenly remembered being 16, our first gratitude dinner. They let me speak that year, too, just a small welcome to the guests. I wore a too big blazer and stumbled through my lines. But afterward, Dad had said, "You'll be running this place someday." Funny how fast someday turns into never. The audience smiled, clapped politely. One investor even gave me a thumbs up. But it felt hollow. Afterward, while I was refilling my water glass at the corner station, Mr. Llewellyn approached me. "Smart of you," he said casually, "to clean the books early, before things looked messy." I stared at him. "I'm sorry?" He chuckled. "Melissa told me you spotted the overages months ago, that you helped sort the ledgers before the auditors got involved. Good instincts." My throat went dry. I nodded, but my mind was racing. I hadn't cleaned anything. I'd just started asking questions. I wandered toward the back of the hall, looking for air, for clarity, anything. My phone buzzed in my purse. A Slack ping. "Angela. Found something. We need to talk. Now." I didn't open the message right away. I just stared at the screen while a string quartet began tuning for the closing hour. In the reflection of the ballroom window, I saw Melissa laughing with Carol. They looked untouchable. But I wasn't the scared intern anymore. I was the one asking the questions they didn't want asked. Somewhere beneath the music and the champagne sparkle, I felt the bottom drop out. And I let it fall. I thought seeing the truth would bring relief. Instead, it brought silence. The heavy kind that settles in your chest and refuses to leave. Rain pressed lightly against the windows of my apartment, each drop a steady metronome against the stillness inside. On my kitchen table sat the envelope Angela had sent, plain, unmarked, thick enough to be unsettling. I'd stared at it through 2 cups of tea and a reheated bowl of soup I barely touched. Now, hours later, it was still sealed. I used the edge of a butter knife to slice it open. Inside were 12 neatly stapled pages, each more damning than the last. Angela had flagged sections with yellow tabs. The first read, "Summary of transfers, 14 months." My eyes scanned the bold lines. $87,000 rerouted through various vendor categories: consulting, outreach, partnerships, all ending with the same recipient, Blueberry Ridge Holdings, LLC. I exhaled sharply. Then I turned the page. Page 2 had a breakdown by month: July, September, December. I spotted codes that looked vaguely familiar: JM42, JMK3. Wait. I blinked. JM42 had been my internal username back when I helped with digital invoices 2 years ago. I hadn't used it since. Yet here it was, tied to transactions I never touched. A pink sticky note in Angela's handwriting was pressed between page 5 and 6. Check page 6. I flipped. It was a scanned image of a transfer form labeled Community Partnerships, Holiday Promotions. At the bottom was a signature, Carol Morales, and next to it, in smaller print, authorized by JM42. I dropped the page. It drifted onto the floor, and for a second I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at it like it might morph into something less real if I waited long enough. My phone buzzed on the counter. Angela. I answered the speaker. I read it. A pause. "I'm sorry, Jenna. I didn't think they'd drag you into this." I stood up, paced. "So they used my credentials. They used my name. They used your loyalty," she said, voice quiet. "That's harder to forgive." There was something about the way she said it, like she knew. Maybe from personal experience. We'd once joked that we both inherited sharp instincts and softer hearts. Mine had finally caught up. After we hung up, I opened the hall closet and reached for the top shelf. A small brown box, still taped at the edges. I pulled it down and set it on the kitchen floor. Inside was the old Morales market apron I used to wear at festivals, deep green, slightly faded. My mom had stitched my initials JM into the strap in thick white thread. Back then, it felt like a badge of pride. I held it in my hands now and felt only weight. A voicemail pinged. It was saved. Years old. From Dad. "We're proud of you, even if we don't say it often." I played it 3 times. Each time it sounded more like a line from a well-rehearsed play. A text popped up from Melissa. "Hey, Mom said you'll sign the year-end stuff? It's just standard. No greeting. No warmth. Just expectation." I turned off the ringer and stared out the window. The rain hadn't stopped. Another ping. "Email this time. Subject line: Tax prep. Need your signature again. ASAP." I didn't open it. Angela sent one final text before her typing bubble disappeared. "Truth has legs. Just decide if you're ready to watch it walk." I stood in the middle of the kitchen, apron in one hand, audit folder in the other, trying to decide which one I was going to put down first. I pulled out my planner, flipping through pages I had barely touched since summer. Grocery lists, canceled meetings, reminders to call my mom, some still marked with hopeful little stars. I used to believe that if I planned hard enough, if I color-coded my intentions, the world would bend toward order. Now, it all looked naive. I made a cup of chamomile tea I didn't want and sat back down at the table, staring at the documents again. A thought crawled into my head, uninvited but stubborn. Had they planned this from the beginning? Or did it start small? Just one temporary transfer to fix a shortfall? One white lie that became easier to repeat? I remembered the first time I was allowed to write the vendor newsletter. Carol had watched me type each word, correcting tone and spacing. "You're the face of this," she said, smiling. "Let's make sure it sounds like you." I had taken that as mentorship. Now I wondered if it had always been manipulation. I glanced at the apron again. I could still smell cinnamon and cured wood, scents from fall festivals and shelf-stocking weekends. The little badge with my initials, once stitched with love, now looked like a forged signature. Outside, the rain thickened. I could hear it collecting on the balcony gutter, the splash and gurgle like a metronome counting down to something I wasn't ready for. My laptop screen dimmed. I tapped the trackpad, and the inbox lit up again. The accountant's message was still there, unread. I clicked open a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Audit Evidence. Then I saved a backup to the cloud. It was time to stop staring. It was time to prepare. Even if the next step would break everything. There's something cruel about nostalgia. It lets you remember just enough to doubt what's happening now. Thanksgiving week brought the kind of chill that makes everything smell sharper. Cinnamon, roasted squash, the faint hint of damp leaves carried on people's coats. I arrived at the Morales house with a manila envelope in my coat pocket and a small stack of checks in my glove compartment. Technically, I was just dropping off payroll, Carol's phrasing, but we both knew this visit was about optics, tradition, playing nice. The house looked almost identical to how it always had this time of year. Warm amber lights draped across the mantel, ceramic pumpkins on the sideboard, the smell of nutmeg and roasted turkey crawling through the halls like it belonged there. It was all designed to lull you into softness. Melissa greeted me at the door, too cheerful by half. "Finally, you made it." Her teeth flashed in a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We saved you a seat. Kyle's been defending it like a hawk." I gave her a tight smile and stepped inside, keeping my coat on longer than necessary. Dinner was an orchestrated dance. Richard carved the turkey with showmanship, Carol toasted resilience and legacy, and Melissa played hostess like she was auditioning for a lifestyle show. Kyle nodded earnestly at all the right moments. The cherry cornbread, our signature, was there too. I took a bite and immediately regretted it. It tasted off. Flat. Like someone had followed the recipe but skipped the memory. After the dishes were cleared and small talk softened into quiet murmurs, I wandered into the den. Boxes labeled Thanksgiving, Misk, were stacked near the hallway closet. One was half open. I bent down, half curious, and found a crumpled invoice with my handwriting from 2017. Next to it, cocktail napkins from a vendor fair and coupons that expired in 2020. My name, reduced to clutter. I sat back on my heels, stared at that invoice for a long moment. It had a doodle of a maple leaf in the corner. Carol always said I added too much personality to professional forms. Now it sat discarded, flattened by years of disuse. Back in the dining room, Carol was refilling wine glasses with the practiced grace of someone who knew how to manage a room. When she reached me, she paused and tilted her head. "I hope you know we're grateful, Jenna." I didn't respond. My fingers brushed the envelope in my coat pocket again. She leaned in just a bit, voice low. "Don't ruin what we built just because you're hurt." I turned to her, my voice calm. "I'm not hurt. I'm done covering for you." Have you ever been the one who kept the peace for years, only to realize silence was part of the harm? If you've ever had to walk away to protect your own peace, comment the number 9 below. Let's see what I choose to leave behind. That was it. No grand scene, no voices raised. Just a line between us, drawn gently but permanently. Before I left, I set the envelope, empty, on the edge of the sideboard. A ghost of a gesture. The letter with the audit findings was still in my bag, but the message had been delivered. Outside, the air bit sharp against my cheeks. I stood on the front porch for a moment, watching my breath rise and dissolve. I didn't feel triumphant, just quiet. My phone buzzed. A message from Melissa. Investors loved your speech clip. Told them you helped write it. Hope that's cool? I didn't open the rest. I deleted it without reading further. Some things didn't need a response. As I walked toward the car, I paused by the curb where the magnolia tree used to be. It had been cut down the year I moved to Durham, after a bad storm split it in two. For a second, I could almost hear the cicadas from the summer evenings when Kyle and I used to sit on the porch with lemonade and make up songs about the neighbors. I smiled faintly, then let the memory pass like steam off the windshield. I drove slowly through the neighborhood, watching lights flicker on in other homes, grandparents hugging grandchildren, couples carrying casserole dishes. I didn't feel envy, exactly. Just a kind of ache for something I no longer trusted. At a red light, I opened the center console and pulled out an old photo strip from the fall fair 6 years ago. Melissa, me, and Kyle, with apple cider in hand and matching flannel. We looked like the kind of family worth saving. Maybe we were, back then. By the time I got home, it was nearly 9 p.m. I made tea, turned off all the lights except the kitchen, and sat at the table staring at the unopened envelope again. It still held the letter. Still held the truth I hadn't delivered. But I had left something behind. That mattered. I powered on my laptop, opened a new folder, and labeled it Next. Nothing else in it yet, just a placeholder. But it felt like a beginning. And beginnings, I've learned, rarely look like fireworks. Sometimes they're just silent, and a choice not to go back. Before going to bed, I wrote one last note, just a line scribbled on a sticky pad. Decide what you'll keep and what you'll leave behind. I placed it on my fridge, right next to an old magnet that read, Morales Market, locally grown pride. I used to believe in that tagline. Now, I believe in starting over. The rain picked up outside, gentle but steady. I let it lull me into sleep, not with peace exactly, but with resolve. Tomorrow will come, and this time I'd be ready to meet it on my own terms. They expected fire. I gave them distance. And somehow, that burned more. I sat at the kitchen table with a resignation letter in front of me, printed on the same cream stationery Carol had used for our holiday promotions. It had a faint scent of cinnamon oil, probably from the drawer it had lived in for years. I held the pen for a while before signing. Not out of hesitation, just ceremony. It wasn't the first time I had typed a resignation. 2 years ago, after Melissa shut me out of a major product launch, I had written a similar letter. I even printed it, but I never signed it. I had told myself then that it wasn't the right time, that families fight and heal. But some wounds aren't meant to scab. They're meant to warn. The blinds in my apartment swayed as a breeze nudged through the cracked window. Outside, the January sky looked colorless, like an old postcard. The post-holiday lull was in full swing. Even the grocery store down the street had stopped piping in cheerful music. Angela had sent me the final version of the redacted audit file. She said it was ready to submit to the compliance board. Quietly, her email ended. No fanfare, no courtroom drama, just truth, sent to the right hands. Then came the notifications. Carol, hope you're well. Melissa, thanks for bailing again. Richard. No message, just a missed call at 9:03 a.m. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I packed a small box. Just the things that mattered. My chipped code-like nobody's watching mug, a photo of Kyle and me from our first market day, and my Morales Market apron, the one with JM stitched into the strap by hand. I'd found it weeks earlier in a bin marked Donate. The thread had faded, but I could still make out the initials. I stopped by the office one last time. The root cellar market looked unchanged, like it had been freeze-framed in some stubborn version of the past. I walked past the shelf where we used to keep seasonal candles, past the counter where I'd once explained apple varieties to a curious 6-year-old. It all looked so normal. That's what got me. Kyle had left a note for me on my desk. Take care of yourself. K. He'd always been the quiet one, but in silence, he said the most. When I found him in the back parking lot, loading boxes into his trunk, he looked up and offered a tired smile. Didn't think you'd come in person, he said. I needed to say goodbye to the place, I replied. Then quieter. And maybe to an old version of me. He nodded, looked like he was about to say something, then stopped. Instead, he pulled something from the front seat and handed it to me. An old corkboard I had used back in the planning office. Still had a few thumbtacks in it. You'll need this. For your next wall. I smiled. Next wall, huh? He shrugged. You don't strike me as someone who walks away without building something new. In the back hallway, I heard the soft buzz of the old vending machine. It still hiccuped whenever it tried to drop a bag of trail mix. That glitch used to frustrate Richard, who insisted nothing in the store should be broken if it bore the Morales name. Nothing quits the Morales name, he used to say. But I didn't quit. I just stopped wearing it. I stood in front of the office door looking at the reflection in the glass. For a moment, I didn't see a marketer or a daughter or a scapegoat. I saw a woman. One who had handed over a decade of loyalty and finally realized that worth isn't measured by sacrifice. That was the real leaving. Not walking away from a building, but walking away from the version of myself who needed to be needed. I thought about calling him back. Just once. Hearing his voice might have meant something. But I knew how that call would go. He'd tell me how much the market had meant to him, how many sacrifices they made. He might even say he was proud of me again, like he used to on birthdays. But this time it would echo too late. Pride without accountability felt more like a strategy than a sentiment. In the quiet, I made a cup of herbal tea, chamomile, and mint, something my grandma used to make after long Sundays. She always said, "Sometimes the best answer is a warm drink and no words at all." So I sat on the couch, mug in hand, letting the steam rise while the sun settled. No speeches, no flashbacks, just peace. That night, I pulled out a folder labeled "For Later" and tucked it into the back of my closet. Inside were copies of every flagged transaction, Angela's notes, and my resignation letter. I didn't need revenge. I just needed a clean drawer. When I stepped outside again, the town looked the same but felt different. Lighter somehow. People passed by without glancing twice, and that was a gift. I didn't want to be recognized as the girl from Morales Market anymore. I wanted to be the woman who'd built something honest from the ashes of something broken. As I turned the corner, I passed an old storefront, once a Morales pop-up, now a handmade pottery shop. Through the window, a new owner laughed with customers, explaining the glaze on a coffee mug. No banners, no slogans, just warmth. For a second, I imagined myself inside, asking about the kiln. Then I kept walking. A block later, a small bookstore had set up a chalkboard outside. It read, "January is for becoming." I smiled at the simplicity of it. No grand declarations, just motion. Quiet, steady motion. And I realized, that's all I ever needed. Angela's final email came just before dusk. "We're launching the new fund. You're still in, right?" I replied. "Only if my name's printed this time." The golden light spilled across the sidewalk as I walked home, past shuttered shops and hopeful windows. Behind me, the banner over the root cellar fluttered in the wind. Rooted in trust. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to correct it. Because maybe legacy isn't about what you leave behind. Maybe it's about what you choose not to carry anymore. Some things don't need to be shouted to be remembered. When I walked away, it wasn't in anger. It was in peace. And somehow, that silence said the most. I used to think holding on was how I proved my worth, but letting go became the truest kind of beginning. Not everyone will love you the right way, but we always get to choose how we love back, with distance, with grace, or with forgiveness. Legacy isn't always what we leave behind, it's what we refuse to carry forward. If this story reminded you of someone or a moment in your own life, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Sometimes a quiet reflection is the loudest connection we can offer one another. If this touched you, feel free to follow for more everyday stories that linger long after they're told. Thank you for listening. Take care, and I hope to see you in the next story.